first of our topical and emergency resolutions for today, entitled Loss of Life in the English Channel. This resolution will be proposed by Bill Kidd, MSP. So welcome, Bill.
Conference, thank you for your support for this motion to reaffirming our welcoming of refugees to Scotland, understanding our moral and legal responsibilities to those forced to leave their homes in search of a new place where they can safely rebuild their lives and homes and community. Now, before I say anything more in my address to you, I want to recognise those courageous and sadly desperate people who lost their lives this week when trying to cross the Channel in the hope of building a new life for themselves in the UK.
Wow. Well, like, you know, sometimes I genuinely have to stop and think, really think about it, and think whether or not people like this genuinely believe the shit that they say when they say it, or if they know damn well that they're talking pish. It's the SNP over the buck. Honestly, I can't tell with some of these people. I mean, this non-binary lookalike is just taken to the camera, and within a mere 10 seconds says to this cancerous SNP, and cringy by the way, SNP conference, autumn conference to be precise, that a bunch of so-called refugees or asylum seekers who drowned trying to cross the Channel from France to the UK, he called them courageous. What the fuck is courageous about that exactly? I'm sorry, I know it might be like a bit of a low-hanging fruit hot take from myself, but you know, what exactly in France would justify branding these people courageous? You know, I'm not going to get bogged down in whether or not to feel sorry for these people. The reality of the matter is that it's their own fault. Obviously not the fault of the children or the young people, whatever they were. But a point that not once crosses the minds of the likes of this buffoon on screen, or any other political party that professes the progressive ideology, any activists, etc. You know, your Sturgeons, your Maggie Chapmans, your Patrick non-binary Harvey, your Labour Party down south, etc. Whoever, irrespective. You know, there's one thing that never crosses their mind, and that is that they're also to blame. They're also at fault. People like him, people like the SNP, etc. They're equally responsible, just the same way that the people that drowned are responsible for their own deaths. And when I say that, what I mean by that is that the more that you automatically assume that these people are legitimate refugees to be, the more that you rattle off reasoning for why they might be here, the more you label them desperate and courageous, etc., the more you constantly remind the thousands like them that have yet to take the journey that politicians such as yourself want them here, that the country wants them here, the people want them here, etc., the more that you publicly attack the so-called barriers that prevent them getting here quicker and easier, whilst constantly arguing for the removal of said barriers, you're encouraging them. They know damn well that one way or another, the likelihood is they're going to get to the UK. You know? And then when something such as this occurs, these people who have done everything I just mentioned do exactly what they were doing prior. And let's continue everything I've just said. They take no responsibility. It's not their fault. Oh, no, they're just the ones screaming from the rooftop, begging, practically begging for them all to come here. You know?
7 people lost their lives on this trip, and it was the worst loss of life of asylum seekers crossing the Channel in recent years. 17 men, 7 women, 2 teenage boys, and a young girl died in this tragedy. Authorities are still in the process of trying to contact their families. This tragedy underlines the gravity of the flaws of the current asylum system in the UK, a matter which is not presently in our hands, but still in the hands of the London government. Conference, we must have the powers to do better. Asylum seekers crossing the Channel will often pay smugglers between €3,000 and €7,000 to get from France to the UK, meaning that a lack of safe routes for refugees is resulting in huge profit and business for organised crime.
Still pushing the smuggler narrative. Yeah, I'm a firm believer that the smuggler narrative is absolute shite. But, not really here to get into that right now. But there he is again, implying that there's a lack of safe routes. This is another thing from the Sustainable Development Goals, by the way. Sustainable Development Goal 10. If you look for the indicators, target indicators, it talks about safe, regular, orderly migration. Reduced inequalities, Sustainable Development Goal 10. That's been the argument since around about 2015, 2016 time, that we need safe, regular routes for these people to get here. And the argument is always, or the counter argument always is, that until such a time, these people will continue to pay smugglers. Now, an easy way to thwart the smugglers' little operation, obviously, would be to send them fucking back. Nobody's going to part with money to a smuggler if they're just going to end up exactly where they started. But no, can't do that, because that breaches human rights. Because apparently, these people have a right to choose wherever they wish to go. But as far as I'm concerned, and to most people that don't view the world through a progressive lens, can quite clearly see that if you are able to hop through multiple different European countries in order to get to France with the intention of going to the UK, you ain't really in great danger. You'd be fucking grateful where you are. I know, of course. Now, we need to do more. It's never enough. Never enough. And if the SNP had their way, I love that they always do this. What? No failed asylum seekers? Be a free-for-all? Again, going back to my original point. Rhetoric like that, indirectly or in some instances directly, encourages more to come.
This means an immediate and proportionate response must be for those with the power to take action to attack the operations of organised crime, prosecuting those who are profiting from exploitation.
Yeah, well, as I said, you can just stop allowing these people to enter the UK and, well, the smugglers have no job anymore.
And opening up more safe routes for refugees to
Of course.
claim asylum. We need to move in the opposite direction of the UK government's Borders Bill. It's reported that policing authorities in France frequently request UK support in dismantling these gangs and regularly receive no helpful response. This is unacceptable. Funding and resources need to be in place to dismantle the criminal side of migration. In conference, it must be our objective to protect the exploited and disarm and dismantle the exploiters. When people arrive in Scotland, we want them to be given every chance to thrive and build their lives here. We understand that those who are asylum seekers never wanted to leave their countries. Rather, they were forced to flee as refugees.
Again, automatically assuming you don't know these people. So any individual in the Middle East or Africa, if they have the ability to listen to this SNP conference, or just in general, the vast majority of rhetoric that comes from politicians such as this little wet wipe, they know that they can use climate change now as an excuse, drought, etc. Or they could just make up some shit that they're desperate, and they could just use this guy's own rhetoric, his own sentences near enough word for word, and say that they had no choice because this little non-binary said it. You're giving these people excuses, reasoning, justification, reaffirming it. It's just so fucking backwards. So backwards. How do you know? Automatically assuming that every single one of these people are here for the right reasons and not one of them is a chancer. You notice though they never ever talk about what's going on at the border in Europe, Poland, etc. I think it's Poland, I can't remember. No, they won't do that. No. Thousands of men men. No, we won't do that. Nah, of course not.
As human beings, they deserve our help. Conference, furthermore, Scotland must use its powers to protect asylum seekers from re-trafficking and modern slavery when they arrive in this country. Our police force and the Scottish Government have been driving campaigns to raise awareness of these issues, but we collectively must be switched on to the reality of modern slavery and ensure we know what to do to provide help and support for people who may be in these situations. And finally, Conference, when families arrive and are settled into homes by local authorities, it must be our ambition to ensure that Scotland is a place that welcomes these people with open arms, that we provide structures and support that offer meaningful opportunities and agency to enable refugees to begin the process of rebuilding a home as part of our Scottish community right here. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you very much, Bill. And to second this topical resolution, delegates, we have Stuart MacDonald, MP. So welcome, Stuart.
Oh God, this will be good.
Conference, what happened this week in the English Channel was a heartbreaking tragedy, and foremost in our thoughts are those who lost their lives, their families and their friends. In the days ahead, we will learn more about who was on that boat. Today we learned about Mariam, a young Kurdish woman from Iraq. These tragic stories will remind us of the simple truth that these are human beings. It's grim that this resolution needs to make that point, but also utterly essential that it does, such as the shocking rhetoric that is used in discussing channel crossings, the othering and the demonising of people. But it's not just the rhetoric that is appalling, but the policy choices that are being made by Priti Patel and her Home Office. The outrageous nature of her Borders Bill, better known as the Anti-Refugee Bill, cannot be overstated. It's an attack on asylum seekers and refugees, the international system of refugee protection, and the Refugee Convention itself. Instead of punishing people smugglers, she is punishing their victims. When that bill comes into force, the experience of asylum seekers and refugees in the UK will go from bad to worse. Those seeking protection here will be made guilty of a criminal offence punishable with up to 4 years in prison simply for arriving without a visa that they cannot possibly get. They'll be put in limbo for 6 months before their asylum claim will even be looked at, probably at a new reception centre modelled on the disgraceful Napier barracks. They could be offshored to a third country, mirroring a system that disgraced Australia, rife with grotesque human rights abuses. And even once recognised as refugees, they'll be denied any possibility of settlement. They'll be denied access to public funds, and they'll be denied any family reunion rights. Criminalised, warehoused, offshored, punished. These are appalling proposals, and Priti Patel and her ministers should be utterly ashamed of themselves. Conference, there is no easy way to prevent people risking their lives in the Channel, but pivotal to our response must be a step change in provision of safe and legal routes. The UK has some of the most restrictive family reunion rules in Europe. The DUB scheme was closed, having barely started. And outside of the EU, Dublin transfers for family members are no longer possible. All that has to be fixed, and more. But you don't need me to tell you, Conference, we cannot rely on the Home Office to do that. I believe that Scotland is more than ready and willing to build an asylum system that respects people and that is built on fairness and human rights. And the day that we can deliver that cannot come fast enough. Conference, for all of these reasons, please give your support to this motion.
Really have no idea how it's possible for men to become that weak. Nonetheless, you notice there's never much elaboration whenever one of these rainbow unicorn sturgeon salesmen go out of their way to talk about a fair asylum system in Scotland or a fair immigration system in Scotland based on fairness and compassion and social justice, etc. But then again, I guess it goes without saying, it'd be a fucking free-for-all. And you'd have every single opportunist and their brother Abdul hopping straight onto the newly implemented safe and legal pathways to blend in quite the thing with potentially legitimate asylum seekers. And since this hypothetical system would be based on fairness and compassion and human rights, etc., the opportunists would know damn well that the chances of a return ticket home are rather slim. Because they're slim anyway. All they need to do is jump on a boat, pretend that they're paying smugglers, and the border force will escort them the majority of the way here. So let's just pretend in a hypothetical scenario that we take that out of the equation and replace it with this fair system that the SNP continuously go on about. What would change? The only thing I could see changing would be an acceleration of the amount here and the quantity. Right? What's this dickhead saying? They're all at it, by the way. Sturgeon as well.
Frankly, every time the Home Secretary and the UK government put up a barrier to those people who have every right to claim asylum. Remember, claiming asylum is a right that every individual has under international law. And every time the UK government and Home Secretary put a barrier to that, they are pushing these people into the hands of the smugglers and potentially to their deaths. So I think the UK government should take a long, hard look at themselves in the mirror, and they should do what is morally right, and that is not putting up barriers as they are intending to do with future legislation, not putting up barriers to those who are rightfully claiming asylum.
Take the opportunity to express my deepest sympathy at the loss of 27 lives in the English Channel yesterday. That was a tragic and shocking loss that will be felt deeply, not just here in the UK, but across the world. Those seeking refuge are human beings. They are driven out of desperation into boats crossing the Channel, and by...
They were in France. I mean, fuck off. What I'm saying, I really don't know if these people genuinely believe the shit that they say half the time. I really don't. I can quite well believe that this thin-lipped twat doesn't believe a word of the shite she says. I really can. But she really is just fucking insufferable. I mean, really? Fucking get it, man.
A lack of humanitarian alternative routes. I believe that it is important that these issues are addressed, and they are addressed with the needs of human beings in mind. We should be working together to ensure that those seeking refuge get protection from exploitation, not punishment or criminalisation. They need rescue, not diversion back into treacherous waters. Scottish ministers have repeatedly called for a much more humane approach to asylum, and we will continue to do so in the wake of this dreadful tragedy.
Fucking share of shite. Just quickly, I'll finish off on this. United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 10. Reduced inequality. Come down target and indicators. 10.7. Facilitate orderly, safe, regular and responsible migration. Now, ever since this compact was signed in 2015, all we have ever heard is safe, legal, sometimes regularly, and responsible migration, safe corridors, etc. Why? Because the alternative is the imaginary fucking smugglers. It's only a matter of time until the safe, legal, and regular routes are implemented. I rest my case. Another day, another shit show in Scotland. Rhetoric wise, anyway. Peace.